When you're a first-time parent, it can be daunting to change your baby, but with time and practice, you'll be able to do it with your eyes closed.
You see what happens when you miss a litter box?
It's the same for plant parents. You have to know when and how to change your babies. So today, I'll show you how I repot an orchid, specifically this Phalaenopsis. As you can see, its blooms are starting to fade away. Don't be scared to do it yourself. It's not that hard, and I'm gonna show you how I do it on this episode of Orquidorky.
Orchids can thrive in a wide variety of media and potting styles, but today we're gonna be focusing on orchid bark.
Generally speaking, if your Phalaenopsis is potted in bark, you should repot it once every 2 to 3 years, depending on the quality of the media and how frequently you water it. If you wait too long, the bark will begin to rot and your orchid will suffer.
You can tell it's time to repot when there's too much solid residue when you water, if there's a funky smell, if there's fungi growing inside the pot, or if the media is too broken down. It might also be time to repot when there's too many roots growing outside their pot, or they are bursting out.
But this one will have to wait. If you repot whilst your orchid is blooming, it'll get stressed and drop its flowers. So try to avoid that. But if you ever have to choose between flowers and roots, always pick roots. Healthy roots are essential for plants to survive. Flowers are not.
I'm glad I'm beautiful from head to root.
The best time to repot your orchid is when it's producing new roots, so they'll grow and adapt to the new media. And just in case the old roots die during the repotting process, you'll be sure there will be new roots coming. Try to avoid repotting during winter when your orchids will probably be resting and when they're not producing new roots, unless it's an emergency. That being said, Phalaenopsis can be repotted year-round, but I would suggest you do it during spring or summer.
Let's get repotting. This is what you'll need. Your orchid. A new pot. I suggest getting a couple of sizes to have different options. Medium grade orchid bark or orchid potting mix. If you want to know how I make my own orchid potting mix, be sure to subscribe. Cutting tools. And cinnamon. Optionally, you might want to add sphagnum moss, river rocks, and inorganic media like lava rock, leca, or perlite.
Just an FYI, most orchids are epiphytes. They don't grow in soil. Don't pot your Phalaenopsis in regular potting mix. For more Phalaenopsis care tips, click on my video on the description below.
Before we begin, you should rinse off all of your potting materials. It's better if you leave your potting mix soaking overnight so the bark has a chance to absorb as much water as possible. Water your orchid thoroughly so it's easier to remove from the pot. If your orchid is in a plastic pot, it will be a lot easier. Squeeze it lightly all around to detach the roots. Carefully remove it from the pot. If there are roots growing through the pot, you might want to carefully break it. Remember that the most important part of the orchids are the roots. But if you accidentally break one, don't worry about it. They can grow back. Remove as much of the old potting media as possible. If a root is completely glued to a piece of bark, let it be. It's better to keep a piece of old media than to damage a healthy root. Take all the time you need. Nowadays, commercial Phalaenopsis production facilities use orchid plugs like this one. They are specially designed for large-scale plant propagation and easier shipping around the globe. They retain a lot of moisture, which is great when they're getting started inside a greenhouse. But it's not a good idea to keep them in a plug long-term in your home. It's time for it to go, piece by piece.
This is the right time to check the health of the roots.
Inspect each root and remove the dead ones. You can squeeze them slightly to check if they're dead or alive. Healthy roots should feel fleshy and firm. Even if they're broken, they still work if they feel firm. Dead roots feel mushy and soft, and you can remove the velamen easily. Cut out all of the dead roots. Just make sure your cutting tools are properly sterilized.
You should sterilize again if you're planning on cutting another orchid, to avoid spreading disease. Use this opportunity to cut out old flower spikes. If you want to cut a flower spike that's still green, after cutting, sprinkle a little bit of cinnamon powder on the wound. Cinnamon helps dry up the wounds and has antimicrobial properties. You can use it on the roots you cut. Just keep it away from the healthy parts. It might dry them up and keep them from working correctly. If it's easier for you, you can mix cinnamon powder with water and use this cinnamon paste. If you had to remove a lot of dead roots, leave your orchid drying overnight so it has a chance to close and dry its wounds. Don't worry, nothing will happen if you keep your orchid dry for a day.
Decide the size of the pot according to the size of the root ball. If you lost a lot of roots, you might have to use a smaller pot. If it grew a lot, use a bigger one. If it still fits, just wash and reuse your pot.
The root ball should fit snugly, but still have enough space for new roots to grow. If you're a beginner, I recommend you use clear plastic orchid pots. They are specially designed to have excellent drainage and ventilation, and you can see how the roots are doing. If you live in a really humid environment, you tend to overwater, or you lost orchids to root rot, you might want to try really airy orchid pots like this one. They usually have a lot of holes so the media dries evenly. They are very effective, but if this is the first time using one of these, remember that you'll probably need to water them more frequently to offset the higher ventilation. Our goal is to create 4 layers. One counterweight layer, one drainage layer, the potting mix layer, and finally a layer to retain moisture. Our goal is to avoid having your pot always moist at the bottom and really dry at the top. The counterweight layer is only needed if you have top-heavy orchids, especially if you live in an earthquake-prone area like me.
Hey! Aren't you forgetting something? Son of a...
During the last earthquake in Mexico City, I lost many flowers because a lot of my orchids are really top-heavy. This one specifically has a lot of scars from the times it has flipped over. That could have been avoided if there was a counterweight layer.
On the bottom, put something heavy like river stones. You can also reuse old broken clay pots. After this, it's time for the drainage layer. Here you should put the biggest pieces of bark and lava rock you have. If you're using a pot that has a lot of drainage or ventilation holes, or if you're using coarse-grained bark, you can skip this layer. Then, place your orchid over that. If it's already dry, water it again so the roots are more flexible.
Continue filling up the pot with the potting mix, trying to put the biggest pieces at the bottom and the smallest pieces and the sphagnum at the top. The bottom usually dries a lot slower, and bigger pieces of bark dry a lot faster, so putting them in layers ensures that the whole pot will dry in a consistent way. This is especially important if you use pots that don't provide that extra ventilation. But don't be too precious about it, it's gonna be fine.
Keep adding your potting mix until there's no space left. Be gentle but firm. The roots can handle it when they're wet.
Make sure your orchid doesn't move at all, so tap and move it slightly, and pack it really tight. It should feel like there's a Black Friday sale down there. And lastly, if you live in a really dry place or your orchid is having trouble producing new roots, you can put a thin layer of sphagnum moss or cocoa fiber at the top of the pot to keep moisture in. But don't overdo it. Remember that air should be able to reach the roots. And you're done! To finish up, I'll give you some extra tips.
The media should cover the roots as much as possible, but it shouldn't cover the leaves. Try to keep the media at the same level as the base of the oldest leaf. It's normal for some Phalaenopsis species to grow kind of crooked.
Not everybody's straight. They do it in the wild to avoid getting drops of water trapped around their leaves.
You may have to water your orchid more often. New potting mix tends to absorb less water.
This is a good time to stimulate root production. My preferred method is using seaweed extracts, but you can use whatever rooting hormone you trust. It's good practice to label your plants when you repot. Add their name or description and the date of their last repotting. Then you'll know how long it's been living in the same potting media, and you'll be able to recognize each one even if you have similar looking plants when they're not in bloom. Okidoki, that's all for today. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and comment all of your questions. Follow me on Instagram or TikTok if you want to see videos like these ones. And if you really like this video, buy me a coffee at ko-fi.com. See you in the next episode of Orquidorky. Bye bye!